Uzhhorod is almost the most western city of Ukraine. It has a 1,000-year history in various states, mainly Hungary. Throughout this time until the 20th century, the city was called Unhvar, and its heart was a medieval fortress on a hill above the Ush River. For more than 360 years, starting from the 14th century, the castle was owned by the Drugeth dynasty. It is a Hungarian count family with French and Italian roots in the Kingdom of Naples. The Drugeths made Unhvar an important political and commercial center. Eastern European monarchs gathered here for negotiations. Many craft workshops operated, specializing in sewing, pottery, carpentry and other crafts. Over the past centuries, this city has been a part of Austria-Hungary, Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union, but some things have remained unchanged. The Drugeth castle still stands on a mountain, and among Uzhhorod residents there are many enterprising and hardworking people. The time of the counts is a thing of the past, but it appears that a new dynasty in the craft of jewelry is being born.
When we first started, our jewelry table was made of old audio speakers, and today we have 20 full-fledged jewelry workbenches, which are operating on a daily basis for 8 hours, or even more.
Yuriy is the oldest of the Kochut brothers. He is 30. Together with his brothers Roman and Ihor, they opened a business that has already made its mark in Ukraine and throughout Europe. The Kochut brothers create jewelry like no one else.
We realized that we wanted to see something new. We were already fed up with the standard jewelry models that we had seen since childhood and wanted to create something unusual, first of all, for ourselves.
How did the Kochut brothers become jewelers, and what does historical reconstruction have to do with it? What precious metal technologies do they use? And why do their products almost always have a touch of nature? What else did these young Uzhhorod residents manage to do? UATV went to the fringes of the country to find people who had in their hearts. The Drugeth dynasty was engaged not only in trade. Indeed, its army participated in many important battles of the Middle Ages and converged on the same battlefield, even with the Knights of the Teutonic Order. Uzhhorod is full of fascinating stories from the past, which of course filled the imagination of young local lads.
I was fond of historical reenactment even before I found out that such a movement existed and there was such an activity. I wanted to forge a sword and weave chainmail. Once in the Uzhhorod castle there was a museum day and 3 knights arrived from Simferopol. I decided to work in this sphere. At first I started to do it myself, then Roman and Ihor joined me in my endeavor.
A year later, the young Kochuts themselves became knights in the Uzhhorod castle, with full ammunition that they made with their own hands, in their father's workshop. Roman wanted to complement the images with medieval accessories.
Their first jewelry items were made of copper and brass, and were done in such a beautiful and perfect medieval style. It was essentially forged jewelry with swords, crusaders' crosses and stuff.
Roman recalls that it was their father at that time who suggested making something out of silver, because jewelry made of copper and brass can quickly oxidize. So he thought, why not make something more durable?
I remember that I was a bit skeptical about this idea. I thought it was impossible and that such an experiment would be something very difficult and unusual. But then our father was excited by the chance to make at least some attempt at working with silver. I made one ring for 6 months while I was at the junior or senior year, but it grew on me.
In Uzhhorod there is no educational institution where jewelers would be trained. All 3 brothers studied as mechanical engineers because it is after all a solid basic education to work with metals in the future. Although then the Kochuts didn't think seriously about jewelry, they earned money by engaging in jousting battles at various conferences and parties. Yuriy created a website for their team in order to make a better presentation, and when Roman became interested in jewelry, he was the first who brought the camera. Then the process went full steam ahead.
At the moment when Roman began to make some crafts with silver, I was still engaged in armor. I produced it, took photographs, processed photos and laid them out when I saw that Roman was engaged in something.
Ну, я побачив, що Рома
But
робить.
he didn't present it the way it could be presented best.
Можна представити.
Коли я робив, я не задумувався.
When I did it, I did not think at first about the presentation, nor about the website, nor about beautiful photographs, or anything like that. It wasn't that work that I wanted to do at that moment.
В цей момент я хотів
I simply wanted to create the most beautiful jewelry.
виготовляти.
Так, я фотографував, помагав. Так,
I took pictures, so I helped Roman, and then he also began to do this.
час Ігор
After some time, Ihor said that he also wanted to make a pendant.
кулон. Я дуже хотів кулон у вигляді тризуба. Але не хотів просити в братів, що
I really wanted a pendant in the form of a Ukrainian trident, but I didn't want to ask the brothers to make it for me. Yuriy suggested to me that I learn how to do it myself, and then we put together that table and simply improvised. We put the countertop on the old audio speakers so that we would have a minimal workplace. Among the tools there was one jigsaw.
один лобзик. Пам'ятаю конкретно ось
It was exactly with this pendant that my passion and love for jewelry art done by manual labor began.
робити щось руками.
As soon as the Kochut brothers really began to succeed, they started to present their jewelry online and opened an online store. Today, the expense of the original models of rings, pendants, earrings, and other items are made in the hundreds, but the masters, especially for UATV, share the story of their most interesting works. How it's made. Now, none of the brothers can explain why they chose such an authorial style in jewelry, asymmetric forms, emphasis on metal processing, and at the same time untreated precious crystals. By the way, they were the first to popularize uncut stones on the Ukrainian jewelry market. But all three of them repeat one thing: they wanted to create something unusual.
Також ми почали
We
використовувати
started using the forged metal texture because it was close to us. Before that, we forged armor and metal at home in the forge.
метал вдома в кузні. А така кована фактура, вона водночас і здається
These textures seem to be quite rough, but at the same time, this forging can be made very artistic and even embossed, depending on which hammer to take.
взяти молоток, або навіть на одному молотку є різні його
Or even on one hammer there are different angles, and forging can be done for each angle.
ковку. Розробили навіть
We even developed our own style with unique names, where there's light forging, brutal forging, and others.
брутал і інші назви.
Jagged wedding rings with traces of a hammer. Previously, Ukrainian newlyweds wouldn't even think about such a masterpiece, but the Kochut brothers managed to make this jewelry aesthetic. And this was not only due to processing.
Називається місячний дует.
It is called moon duet. I wanted to make a double ring, which consists of two parts on a finger with such a round moonstone.
Це на пальці. Саме з таким круглим місячним каменем.
And at one moment, the idea appeared. I drew a sketch of how the full moon combines with the crescent.
Повний місяць складається з півмісяцем. Далі ми зробили 3D-модель і реалізували.
Next, we made a 3D model and implemented it already in metal. Then this model had many different upgrades, and yet this classic version has been preserved to this very day.
Now, Yuriy practically doesn't work on jewelry. He controls the production management process, negotiations, marketing, and other organizational issues. But at the jewelry table, from morning until late evening, you can find Ihor. Now he's processing another variation of a pendant made of silver and gold called Remembering Childhood.
Це не самий простий кулон, він є частково
This is not the simplest pendant. It is to a certain degree kinematic, as it is called. That is, it has a moving element, namely a swing. It is so round in shape and depicts an old large mighty tree. A swing is suspended on one of its branches.
гілок, підвішена гойдалка. Ідея була в тому, щоб
The idea was to reflect this feeling that we can't get childhood back.
вже повернути.
Usually, the first visualization, freehand sketches, is followed by a model in jewelry wax. You can do this with most rings, but such a pendant is an intricate spatial object with subtle elements. Cutting it by hand is very time-consuming and difficult. Therefore, childhood recollection began with a 3D model on a computer. Then a numerically controlled machine tool accurately and relatively quickly cuts it out in wax. This is the round basis of the pendant. Now the hardest part is to cast it.
Воскові моделі збираються на стовбурі, щоб їх було там.
Wax models are assembled on the barrel in order to make a lot of them. After that, they're filled in a flask, a frame for the mold, with a gypsum mixture. Then they go through the drying process. and after that they're put into the oven, where the flasks are baked. The baking cycle takes 12 hours. Baking modes should be accurate and verified. The temperature regime and time should be strictly maintained. The fact is that the flasks are heated to approximately 720 to 730 degrees.
All this is done in order that the foam dries properly and hardens so that cracks don't form, silver doesn't later pour out later. The wax softens and flows out at the very beginning, and as a result, the plaster cast from this model should be able to withstand the heat of molten metal. About 1,000 degrees Celsius, the way of pouring silver into the mold for forging this pendant is a very exact science.
There are two funnels or gates, and they're sufficient. They have a large cross-section so that a lot of metal can be poured into them at once, which does not give them enough time to freeze when it completely sheds this form. Such cases often happen. This means that the temperature of the metal was incorrectly selected, or the wrong funneling system was used. As a result, either a few funnels are not enough to completely fill the entire model, or the cross-section is simply incorrect.
In order to get the final product, even using modern equipment, you have to experiment with each new model. The foundry of the Kochut brothers is located in an isolated room where temperature conditions can be easily controlled.
The casting process is very demanding when it comes to some of the most insignificant factors. The relative humidity in the workshop may affect how the final product turns out. Metals are like living substances. This is in fact the biology of metals, and I'm sure that it has not yet been completely revealed to anyone in the world at all. Nobody knows how to do it right away with absolute quality.
In case of failure, the metal can always be sent for remelting. In the end, the silver template of the pendant appears on Ihor's table.
This is a freshly cast, unfinished piece. The pendant is double-sided, that is, the tree is drawn in it both on one side and on the other side, that is, on the front and the back.
Using a manual jigsaw, Ihor saws off the funnels and begins finer processing. He needs to hide places on a twisted branch where the metal was poured and then make the silver texture.
I make the texture of the bark of a tree with a special cotton wood, so that the product is better detailed.
Only now Ihor starts to work with the swing. Ropes are of a gold wire with a diameter of 0.5 millimeter. The master passes it into finished loop on a tree and weaves it without saying any additional tools.
I'm trying to measure whether the wire is the exact length. It is necessary to slightly align it. The first rope is ready, on the one hand. Then this process requires a lot more fitting and setting of this mechanism, so it does not wedge, but actually sways there. Silver is additionally oxidized for contrast. That is, it acquires such a black color in the relief in order to better draw the tree and other reliefs of this pendant.
On the other hand, the wire is soldered to a gold bench and the working swing is ready.
Such are Roman's childhood memories.
The Kochut brothers are ready to perpetuate any memory. The masters admit that they are not interested in repeating their popular jewelry, rather than creating new ones together with people who come to them. Most often, engaged couples want special wedding rings. Yuriy even came up with a special service for couples in love to process cast rings together on a double jewelry table. These Ukrainian master jewelers from Uzhhorod have offices in the UK, Austria and Kazakhstan, and they have plans to open new offices in other countries. But the brothers promised each other that they would never engage in mass production. After all, what is the interest in such a product if you don't do something new every day?
We reached such a level that we want to set trends in Ukrainian jewelry design. It is possible, even in the global jewelry design sphere, to set certain trends and propose new ideas and directions. We want to help develop this industry on a massive nationwide Ukrainian scale.
Roman Kochut promised to talk about the Japanese technique of mokume gane. but he disappeared from the workshop for several hours. Oh, and here's Roman.
А коли ми вже виготовляли
When we were making jewelry, we needed a table in our jewelry showroom, and it just so happened that now we're also making furniture. But more about the next time we meet.
про це вже якось іншим разом.